Hi guys, it's Janet Maines, and I would like to talk with you today about how to use a proportional divider accurately. The things that you'll need are a clear 18 or 24-inch ruler, a couple of different pencils, one light and one dark, maybe a 4 or 2H, and then a 4B or 8B, something like that. You'll need your drawing paper, and I recommend a Bristol paper, maybe a vellum finish or a smooth finish. If you use vellum, you might want to use the back side of the sheet where the tooth of the paper is much smoother. It's great for blending, especially with portraits. Also, you'll need some painter's tape that's not terribly sticky, but it's good enough for our purposes. You'll need a little can of spray adhesive. And then you'll also need either a T-square or a plastic triangle. Mine is ancient and it's all cracked, but it works. That's about all that you need to really do this upright. So the first thing that I want to show you is the divider itself. Now, most of you will probably have one of the black plastic dividers, which is great. It's wonderful. However, the one that I had, I ended up having to give to a student, and so I ended up getting a metal one, which works about the same way, but I can explain to you how yours works from showing you mine. The way that the divider works, the proportional part of the divider, is because there's a pin in the center of it that has a little, yours has a little clamp piece on it, that as you slide the clamp off, the pin is removable. It comes out the back, and underneath the pin is a little clear washer, which is very important in making this divider work properly. You can move your pen up and down the holes on the divider to change your proportions. Just make sure that when you do move the pen, you also move the washer, and don't lose it because it won't, the divider won't work very well after that. The pen, the way that you, or the amount that you move it, is going to change your proportions, like I said. You'll measure with the small end, and then the long end is what you will be replicating on your paper. So if I move this down on mine to the very end down here, or maybe not the very end, that's kind of crazy. Okay, so with this, if I measure on my reference picture an area, say the length of her nose, then I turn it around. Instead of using that end, I turn it around, and that's how big her nose would be on my paper. Well, obviously that's a little bit too big because I wouldn't be able to fit the rest of her face on. So that's a great rule of thumb for you. Always measure the longest part or widest part of your reference photo and check it with your paper to make sure that it will fit before you get started. You don't want any rude awakenings when you get everything all placed here and find out it won't fit. So measure first, always. I'm going to move mine down to make it just slightly larger than the reference photo. So when I measure from the top of her head down to the bottom of the picture, instead of it being that big on my page, it's going to be a little bit larger. It'll fit on the paper, but just fit. Here's the portrait that I chose. It's just a random portrait off of Pinterest that I printed out on regular typing paper. And then I took the picture. Well, let me discuss this first. I printed it as a 4x6. You could do a 5x7 if you wanted to. I wouldn't go larger than that for plotting your points using the divider, but you will want a larger one for reference. You could print out an 8.5x11, or you could just simply have an electronic version of it on a tablet that you can enlarge and be able to see portions of the face or whatever it is that you're drawing a little bit more clearly, the detail. I would also recommend that you not only print a color version, but a black and white version. When you go to do the shading, sometimes you'll see just subtle differences between a black and white and color photo that you can really start to transfer onto your drawing paper, and one or the other doesn't show it quite as well. So I typically bounce back and forth between a color and a black and white version myself. So I've printed this out 4 by 6, and then I took a piece of drawing paper that I'm using, this vellum finish of the Bristol, and I put spray mount on the paper and then attached my photograph on top of that, nice and smooth. The reason why you do that is that you want this paper to be just slightly thicker than your drawing paper, which you'll understand when we get to drawing. Now, I took the paper after I glued the picture on it, and I took my T-square and I lined it up so that all the corners are exactly 90-degree angles. Everything is exactly square. So, and I don't mean that the picture has to be a square. It can be a rectangle. But these two sides need to be perfectly parallel with each other, and these two sides need to be perfectly parallel with each other. You can use your plastic triangle to do the same. I would not use an X-Acto knife to cut out on the edge of anything that's plastic, because you'll actually cut the plastic. But if you use a metal ruler to cut it out with, I would use an X-Acto knife or a paper cutter if you have a really good one. But I surely would not use scissors, because you cannot cut, or at least I cannot cut a perfectly straight line, and you're going to need it to be exactly right. So if you have a good X-Acto knife or utility knife that's good and sharp, that will do the trick. To begin the process, we're going to draw 2 bearing lines that will give us some measurements to get started with. What we do is we find one that's vertical and one that's horizontal. They don't have to be perfectly vertical and horizontal, but just going in enough opposite direction that it crosses, the 2 lines will cross each other. So what I like to do is, you could go straight across if you wanted to, but I prefer to go on the angle of the eyes, because that will show the tilt of the head. So we're going to take the dark pencil on your reference photo, and we're going to draw a line right across the page. Now we're going to draw a vertical line. Well, I could make this perpendicular lines and go down the center of her face if I wanted to, but in looking at this, I think I would rather go through the center of her eye and the center of her teeth. And I think that will give me more interesting places to draw from. So now I've got 2 bearing lines. Where they cross is naturally going to be right in the center of her eye, where it's very dark. I'd like for you to draw a circle around that line, or around that point where they cross, and we're going to number that and call that number 1. That's your main bearing point, where these 2 lines intersect. That's the most important point. You're going to use it for everything. So make sure that you've got that point right where the 2 lines intersect. The next thing that we will do is to transfer these lines over to our paper. Now, when we draw on the paper, we don't want to use the dark pencil. We want to use a lighter pencil, because we'll be erasing these lines. So the way that we do this to begin with is we decide where on our paper we want the portrait to be placed. Do we want it centered? Now mine will be a little bit larger. Do we want it centered? Maybe if the person is looking off to the side, you may want to put the person a little bit on the side so they're not just looking right off the edge of the paper. Or you may want to leave room for another figure or something in the background that could be of interest. But in our case, I'm going to just put it right in the center. Now I'm going to hold my finger lightly where the 2 lines cross, and I'm going to pull the reference picture out from underneath, leaving my finger right where it is, like the old tablecloth trick. And I'll put a dot right there. Now that represents that dot that we put a circle around. Now we need to get our 2 lines transferred over to this paper as well. The way we do that is we line the ruler up I'm going to turn it this way. Line the ruler up with one of the lines. I'm doing the horizontal line first. I have it lined up just right, and I'm going to take a piece of painter's tape and I'm going to tape the ruler to the picture. You don't have to do this, but it does make it a lot easier because it doesn't get out of alignment. Now I'm going to, this is where the thickness of the paper comes in. We're going to be butting these two edges right up against each other. Can't be crooked like this or this. It has to touch all the way down. We're going to slide this paper down until our ruler is in line with that point that we drew. So now we're right in line with it, and I'm going to draw a light line across my paper going right through that point. Can you see that? I'll hold it up here a little bit more. So now it's going through that point. Now we're going to draw the other line. So I'll remove my tape and now line my straight edge up with the vertical line. And again, I'll tape it just to hold it good and straight. And now that I've gotten that taped, I'll have to move this up to the top of the paper so that my ruler's edge will go through that point again. Check to make sure this is all smooth and lined up right across the edge, and now I can draw this line. Now, if you can see well enough, you'll see that the cross of the two lines is identical. So now we're ready to start plotting points. We'll go back to the dark pencil because we're going to pick points of interest on these two lines that will help us determine what is what in our drawing. So I'm going to place a point every time that there's a notable change. Like right here, we'll call that point 2. That's the edge of her hair. Then we'll do her hairline here. We'll call that point 3. Her eyebrow, top and bottom, we'll do 4 and 5. Then we'll have her eyelid, the crease, will be 6. We can have the top and the bottom of her eyelids, top lid and bottom lid. So we'll make that 7. And this one at the bottom will be 8. Then we drop down here to the side of her nose. We'll call that one 9. Top and bottom of both lips, 10, 11, 12, 13. Her chin, we'll make that 14. Top of her collar, 15. And the bottom of the picture, 16. Now, notice, except for this one, I made all these points very small. The accuracy is very important. So you don't want a great big point, because when you use your divider, you won't know where in that point to put the point of the divider. Now let's go across this line. How about one here where her ear and her hair meet? So we ended with 16, we'll make this 17. The outside, inside, inside, outside of her two eyes. So we've got 18, 19, 20, make that a little darker, and 21. And then we could do the inside of her hair here, that would be 22, and the outside would be 23. Now we have lots of points that we can start to transfer over here. As we fill this up with critical points that we'll be plotting, we will have over here basically a connect the dots drawing. So as you connect your dots, your drawing, the portrait will start to appear. You can do as few dots or as many dots as you desire. It just depends on your confidence in being able to draw freehand from looking here at the reference photo. And now we can do the easy part. We're going to measure, and we're going to start, everything is going to start from this center point that we've marked. At this point, that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to go all the way to the bottom of the picture to point 16. So make sure that I'm right on that point, and I am. So this is the end that I'm measuring the photo with. I flip it over, and now this is the end that I'll be drawing from. So I mean, it is right at the bottom of the page. So I will probably end up not drawing this all this distance. I'll probably end it about here, let it fade out or something. Now we'll start at the top, and let's put a point where number 2 is. Flip it over, and we go to right here. So that will be the top of her head, which is a nice distance from the top of the paper. Let's go and do number 15, which is the top of her turtleneck. Flip it over, and we'll put it right. Make sure I've got it exactly right. Right there is 15. So I need to number these lightly as we go along so that I don't forget which dot represents which point. This is 16 down here. This is number 1. Now, I would go ahead and plot all of these points using the same method. I'll do a couple of them on the horizontal line as well. So I will start here from the center. I'm going to go to point 17. Flip it over, and point 17 will be right here. Then I go back and I will measure out to point 23. Flip it over, and point 23 would be right here. So let me hold this a little closer so you can see what I have put in so far. Now I know that this is giving me the outsides of her head. We know this is going to come up here, something like this. You can loosely see where this is coming. Don't want to draw in too much yet because we have other points that we can plot to really give us a much more accurate measurement. But you're starting to see this emerge now. Now, after you've gotten all the points plotted on both of these lines that you've marked, the question is, what about points outside here? How are you going to know where her nose is or where the corners of her mouth are? They're not on the line, so how do we do this? Well, just as we made bearing lines here, we'll have to make bearing lines for points that are off of these lines, and then we'll use our divider. It's not as complicated as it sounds. Let's try, I'm going to go back to the dark pencil, and let's put a point right here where her neck comes down and meets her turtleneck. We'll call this point 24. The way that we're going to find where 24 is, go back to my light pencil. We're going to run the ruler through point 24 and up through that center point where the two bearing lines intersect. So right there, we're in line with that. We take our tape again, and I'm going to tape this together. Now, we're going to move over, and we're going to go underneath the picture this time. Now, again, we're butting this up against the reference photo, and we're going to line it up with that center point. Make sure that it's all flush, which it is. We're right through the center point. So now I know that if this was where her collar started, then I know over here her neck is going to be hitting it somewhere around in here. So I'm just going to make a little light line, not terribly long, And then I'm going to use my dividers, and I'm going to measure from the center point down to point 24. Make sure it is right on that center point. Flip it over using my light pencil. Come over here, and I measure right down to this point on the line that I just created. So this will be point 24. So the neck of her top is going to come down like this. Let's do one more. How about a point right here where her part comes in? We'll make this point 25. So right there we know that it's going to have a little curve and a little curve, and her hairline's going to come up here in the center for a part. So let's see here how we will line this up. Take the ruler, we'll come through point 25 and through our center point, just right there. Once we have that lined up, we can tape it. Painter's tape is great because it doesn't hurt the photograph at all, and it keeps all this in one unit, which I like. So now we come up here to the top, and we get where we don't have a whole lot of paper left over. Let me slide this down so you can see. But we have enough to line it up and get that dot. This is flush here, so we're good to go. So we know it's going to be up in this quadrant somewhere, but I don't know exactly where. I'm thinking where I kind of sketched in the hairline. I'm hoping it's going to be close to that. Now we'll take the ruler off and measure. So we go from the center point to point 25. And now we'll flip the dividers over, and there we are, right there. And that's right where I had guessed it to be. So now where her part is, her hair will come up a little bit on either side. Looking at this, I can tell that it comes up, comes up. Now we don't know too much more information about her head yet. We've got point 2, so we can kind of see that curve. And we have point 17, but we don't know how rounded this is. It looks like it kind of comes out a little bit and then goes more straight down. So we have to do more plotting on that to make sure that we have it correct. But this is how to get all the points. You might do one at the bottom of her ear. You may do one to show where her nostrils are, the outside, the wings of her nose, the corners of her mouth, the outsides of her hair down at where it meets her top. All of those are crucial points to get in so that you can see exactly where everything is supposed to be located. Let me mark this as 25. And once you get all of your points plotted that you feel like you need, then if it looks like it's completely right, like this is going to be where her one eye is, and I don't know how big that eye is going to be yet. The other eye is going to be over here. You've got a little part of her hair showing here, and this eye comes over here. So all of this information, once you get that all in, then you'll be able to start really drawing the whole portrait in, and it will just emerge from the paper. It's very exciting when you do that. And then once you've gotten all your points in and everything is sketched in properly, you can go in and erase all your lines, points, and numbers. And then the fun part starts, the shading. And you will see your portrait come to life, and you'll be so happy with it because all your proportions will be exactly correct. I hope this has helped you, and I'm very anxious to see how your first drawing comes out.